What's going on, guys? Seth here from Team Union Seth. Today I'm going over a little bit basically of how I draft in the Draft League format. So as you guys know, I love the Draft League format. I'm all about it. And I love, one of my favorite parts is the drafting itself. So actually forming and drafting a new team and being able to play with that. So I love the planning aspect. I love the draft itself and having to adapt and do all these different things. And I wanted to share a little bit of how I typically draft with you guys, and I'm using my current League Season 16 with you guys as an example. So, going into start, I had a few mons that I was prepared to build around. I knew I really wanted Landorus Therian, and I knew I really wanted Mega Slowbro. Now, obviously Landorus Therian is one of the best mons in the format, so I didn't expect it to get as far as it did. It actually, I believe, the 10th pick. Yeah, I believe I was the 10th pick in the draft, and surprisingly Landorus Therian fell that far. So I was very happy to get it. I was definitely prepared to pick up something else. Other mons I had on my radar were Weavile, Victini, Celesteela, and a couple other mons in general. Tapu Bulu was there, Azumarill, and there were some other mons that I was thinking about for my first pick. But Landorus did drop all the way down to my 10th pick, and I was really excited it did because I really wanted that thing. I wanted to use it. I'd never used it in Draft League before, so I was really excited that it dropped to there. So I knew I was going to go ahead and scoop that up. I knew it wouldn't fall any further than that pick, so I did scoop that one up. Now, as for Mega Slowbro isn't a huge, it's not a very popular mon in the format. I think personally that is very good, especially in certain matchups. It's not super consistent, so it's not something you can bring every week, pretty much like Landorus Therian, which is why it's not seen a whole lot in the format. But I do think it's a very quality mon, and it's very useful in a lot of different matchups. So I knew it would drop pretty low in the draft. It was also in Mega Tier 3, so it wasn't exactly a Mega that most people were going after, so I knew it would drop pretty far and I could wait a while to get it, which is why I drafted how I did. So what you guys see on screen is the team, the order of what I drafted it in, or the number pick it was for me, and then I have basically my checklist. So this is my checklist when I go to build it, pretty much, or go to draft. It changes pretty much every draft. Like, it gets little updates, little tweaks. I'll usually add to it and change things a little bit every time I go into a draft, depending on what I want, or just depending on what I've experienced from previous drafts and how I did in certain seasons and things like that. So with that, you can see I have Fire, Water, Grass Core, Fairy, Dragon, Steel Core, Dark, Psychic, and Fighting Core, which is actually something I was looking into very recently. I actually found that out that was a thing, and decided to use it pretty much because it is a pretty cool core, and it's pretty good. So then we have 4 Stealth Rockers, a Spikes user, a Toxic Spikes user, and then a Toxic Spikes Absorber, a Rapid Spinner, a Spin Blocker, so basically a Ghost type, and 3 Defog users, 2 Setup Sweepers, so mons that typically are known to set up. So you have like Dragonite that typically uses Dragon Dance, or Gyarados with Dragon Dance, or even like Landorus with Swords Dance, Rock Polish, Scizor with Swords Dance, things like that, Rabambi Quiver Dance, Volcarona Quiver Dance, things that are a little bit more known to set up. If it's something, random that just happens to get set up, like Jolteon with Workup, I wouldn't really consider that a setup sweeper. Chestnut, even though it gets Belly Drum, I wouldn't really consider that a setup sweeper. So something that's a little bit more popular in the setup sweeping nature, I guess. A Nuke, so basically something that can come in and hit something ridiculously hard. That's that. So whether it's with specs, band, whatever, something that can just hit ridiculously hard. And then a powerful Z user is another thing, so something that can really take advantage of a Z Crystal, whether it's one of its stabs, whether it's something else, just something that's really strong with a Z Crystal. Then we have 3 priority users. We have a ground type, a ground immunity, and another ground immunity. Then we have Volt Switch and U-Turn. So 1 Volt Switch, 1 Volt Switcher, and 3 U-Turners. Typically I like to draft more than just 4 momentum users, but this is kind of bare minimum. I really like momentum. I really like Volt Turn, and I love to have a nice little Volt Turn core on my teams. So typically I do draft more than just 4 Volt Turners, but this is pretty much bare minimum for me. 2 clerics, so I do want some different cleric options to heal up my team. 4 mons with reliable recovery. Now that doesn't necessarily mean 4 defensive mons. It could be like Latios gets recover, gets roost, but it's not necessarily considered a wall or a defensive mon. So things with reliable recovery, you know, sometimes you'll see a Life Orb Latios with roost. You know, so something that has that reliable recovery that can heal up if it needs to, not necessarily a defensive mon. And then I usually like to have a mon with base 130 speed or higher. So something super fast is really something I look for in each and every draft. So starting off, as we talked about, my first pick was the Lander Asterion form. Now this crosses off a bunch of things on my list. So that gives me a Stealth Rocker. That gives me a Defogger. It gives me a Setup Sweeper. You know, it gives me a Setup Sweeper, Rock Polish, Swords Dance. Gives me a powerful Z user. I wouldn't really consider it a nuke, but it gives me a powerful Z user. It gives me a ground type, so that electric immunity. It gives me a U-turner. Okay, so right there, check off a ton of things on my list with the Lander Asterion. Now, what's also cool about it is it can be defensive or it can be offensive. So I really like having versatile mons that can be defensive, offensive, a utility, whatever. Because it throws my opponent off. They're not exactly sure what I'm going to bring from week to week. So that's definitely something really cool that I like. So another thing that's super important for me is being able to adapt to the draft. So things are going to get sniped. It's going to happen. Sometimes I'll see people plan out, you know, a list of 11, 12 mons in the exact order they want to draft. And while sometimes I will do this and pick which mons I want and when, I am always prepared to adapt. So I know that you're going to get sniped. You're most likely not going to get the exact team you want. And that's exactly what happened here. I didn't get exactly what I wanted. I'll actually tell you guys. The team that I wanted, the original team that I was going after, was Lander Asterion, Kyurem, Chestnut, Zoroark, Electivire, Miltank, Regice, Terrakion, Scizor, Crobat, Swellow, and Mega Slowbro. So we did get a good amount of mons that were on my list, but we didn't get everything that was on my list. So there are some times where you need to adapt, and even there were actually a few times, like for example, Zoroark was available in like the 8th round or something where I wanted to pick it, but I realized I needed some other things on my team instead based on what I had currently. So you will get sniped, and there are times that you have to adapt. So what I like to do is I'll go in with like a pool of mons that I want to draft. I'll go in with like tier 1 mons that I really want, or like mons that I definitely want on my team that I want to try to get early. And then I'll go with other mons that I can get later in the draft that I think will fall that far. And then I'll have not necessarily backups for each mon. I try not to go too super in-depth with like backups on backups on backups. And if this happens, I go with this. And if this happens, I go with this. I just don't see the point for that. I like to adapt a little bit more on the fly and pick whatever happens, pick from there. So I know what I need. The checklist helps with that a lot. I know what I need at a certain point in any draft. So I'll look at my pool of mons. I'll say, hey, do one of these mons fit the role that I need right now? If yes, I can go with that mon. If not, I can look for something else on the board. So my second pick, I went with Kyurem. It was a snake draft, so it came back around. I believe it was a snake draft. And I got the Kyurem. So this does check off a few more boxes for me. So I get my Dragon type for my Fairy Dragon Steel Core. And I do get that nuke right there. So Specs Kyurem can really be a nuke. Even without it, it can be a nuke. So definitely check off a couple more boxes there with the Kyurem pick. So Kyurem was really cool. It gave me a powerful special attacker to pair up with Landorus. And it gave me a decent speed stat at 95. So my next pick was the Scizor. So Scizor was something I really wanted. I was really excited about Scizor. Excuse me. I was really excited about Scizor because I really wanted it for U-turn and for its bullet punch. I've never used Scizor before, previous to this league, and I'm really glad I was able to pick it up. That's why I picked it up maybe a little early. Round 3 might have been a little bit early for regular Scizor, but I really wanted it, so I wanted to make sure I picked it up. So I did pull it in the 3rd round. So this does check off the Steel type for me. This checks off another Defogger. Checks off another Setup Sweeper. Checks off Priority, which is awesome. Gives me another U-turner. and it gives me reliable recovery. So really starting to fill in my checklist here, getting a lot of things off the board already, which is awesome. So my next pick, I went with the Chestnut. So I knew I wanted a defensive mon, something that could really take hits. I had the Landorus, but I'm not going to want to run that defensive every week. So I knew I needed something that could take a lot of hits and really sit there and be kind of annoying for some physical threats. So this checks off my grass type, checks off my fighting type. It checks off a spikes user, so it does give me spikes, which is awesome. And it does give me reliable recovery in synthesis. So checking off a few more boxes. At this point, I have the Landers, I have Kyurem, I have Scizor, and I have Chestnut. So I did want a little bit more bulk in my draft, but I also did see that there was something I really, really wanted in the Jolteon. So Jolteon was my 5th round pick. I love Jolteon. I think it's one of, if not the best electric type in the format, especially for its tier. In most drafts, it is tier 3, and I think at tier 3, Jolteon is an incredible value. So I love Jolteon in the format. And bring it in, it gives me my Volt Switch user. It also gives me a Cleric. It does get Heal Bell, and it gives me my base 130 or more. So really hitting some speed this time around, really getting up there in the speed. That was something I was lacking up to this point in the draft, was a really fast mon. Definitely gave me some good speed in there. So my fastest mon up to this point was Kyurem, which hit 95. But Jolteon putting me up in those 130s, really giving me a fast mon that this team can utilize. So my next pick that I went with was Silvally. Now, Silvally is a little controversial in some leagues. In ours, I believe it was tier 4. So I was able to pick up Silvally, and I could use any form I wanted, any type Silvally I wanted. And I knew that that would be really, really cool and very, very valuable, especially for a tier 4 pick. So I went up and I scooped Silvally, maybe again a little bit early. I probably could have got it a round or two later, but I wanted to make sure I had this thing on my team. It was definitely one of the picks I was looking at prior to the draft, so it's something I definitely wanted. So I'm not going to count this in any of the cores because it's not really that type of mon. But it does give me another defogger, okay? And it can even give me momentum with the parting shot and the U-turn. So, well, we'll put in there for a U-turn. It does get U-turn, it gets the parting shot. So it gives me more momentum, more volt turn, and then you get the parting shot there as well. So now I was really looking at, I needed some more bulk. I needed some special bulk. Silvally is a good bulky mon. It can be run defensively and can take some hits, but it doesn't really have great recovery options. So I wanted something with reliable recovery that could help itself out and could also support the team a little bit. So we ended up going with Aromatisse. Now Aromatisse I think is a very, very quality mon in this format. I think it works really, really well. I also wanted a fairy type. I wanted a fairy type at this point in the draft. I knew I would need one. So Aromatisse gets Wish, it gets Aromatherapy, Heal Bell. Its special attack isn't even that bad. I'm pretty sure it's around base 100, base 102, something like that. Again, it is that fairy type. It has good HP and some good bulk. So this checks off my fairy type, which does complete my fairy dragon steel core. Now, Kyurem, Aromatisse, and Scizor is not the best fairy dragon steel core. It's not super strong, but it does give me those typings and some good resistances to each other. This also gives me another Cleric, as well as reliable recovery in Wish. So, getting a lot of green in here, checking off these boxes. And next up, I was looking for something kind of cool, kind of bold, and a little bit interesting. So I went with Rabombi. Now, I went with another fairy type, just because I think fairy types are really useful in the format. And Rabombi was something that I wanted more speed. I was really lacking some speed in my draft, other than the Jolteon, obviously. And I wanted more speed. It's also a sticky web user, which is really cool and can be useful, especially with the slower end of my team, like the Kyurem, like the Scizor, and can help support them. And it's also another setup sweeper with Quiver Dance. Getting a Quiver Dance or even 2-up with this thing makes it super strong. Moonblast and Bug Buzz have really good coverage. And then even running a Hidden Power or something like that can be really, really good. So this does give me, it gives me another setup sweeper. And I just thought it was a really good mon, and I didn't think it would drop much further, so I wanted to pick it up where it was. Next, I decided to go with the Incineroar. So I decided to go with the Incineroar. That should be a 9 here. So next I decided to go with the Incineroar. Incineroar has, over the course of the season, become one of my favorite mons to use in the format, and being in, I believe, Tier 4 is an exceptional value. With an Assault Vest, it is unbelievably bulky. It's so good. Sorry, my Discord is just kind of blowing up here. With an Assault Vest, it is so bulky on the special side. Intimidate is awesome as well. It's really, really nice for just to take some special hits. It gets knockoff. It gets U-turn, so I get another U-turner. I also really wanted a fire type at this point. I wanted a fire type to help round out my fire, water, grass core because I knew I was going to get Slowbro later. And like I said, it also gets knockoff. So this does cross off our fire type. And it also does, excuse me, it also gets that U-turn there. I also forgot to check off ground immunity for the Landorus before. So, moving on, my next pick was the Mega Slowbro. I knew I wanted it. I wasn't sure if anyone would take it at this point. Most everyone had their Megas. I think 1 or 2 other teams didn't. And I was getting a little concerned this thing will be taken because they hadn't taken their Megas. But I wanted to make sure I had this on my team because it was a very crucial part, and I had not gotten a water type yet. So I wanted to make sure I had this thing on my team just in case, just in case someone else were to take it. So I did get the Mega Slowbro. So this rounds out my Fire, Water, Grass core. And Incineroar also gave me that Dark type here for this core. And it rounds out my Dark, Psychic, Fighting core as well. So I have all of my cores done. And it gives me more reliable recovery. So at this point, I'm really, really happy with my draft. I'm really excited about it to see what it's going to do. And I wanted to put together a couple more mons, a couple pieces to the puzzle that were left. So my next pick was Regice. Now, I wanted a solid special wall. Mega Slowbro's physical defense is 180. It's an insane physical wall. And I wanted something similar on the special side. So I went with the Regice. It has I believe it's 200 base special defense. So I was really excited about this pick to get that. So it did give me that high special defense, and it gave me some really good stats and some good coverage as well. It can also potentially be a setup sweeper with Curse or Rock Polish. So I was excited about this pick. I needed a lower tier mon, so that kind of fit the bill. And last but not least, my final pick in the draft was Terrakion. So I went with the Terrakion. I can't believe Terrakion dropped to the last round of the draft. I was super pumped that I was able to pick it up in the last round of the draft. For some reason, before the draft was happening, I was thinking it would drop this far, so I wasn't really prioritizing it up higher in the rounds. So I did wait this long, and I'm very, very glad I did, that I was able to snag up the Terrakion. It gives me another Stealth Rocker, which is cool. And that's it for the checklist. So I got most things on my checklist. There are a few things, and we'll go over that in a second. But back to Terrakion. Terrakion gave me an insane physical presence. Fighting and Rock is a great offensive typing. It gives me another mon above base 100 speed, so it's at 108. So that gives me 3 mons above that base 100. So I have 130 with Jolteon, 124 with Rabombi, and 108 with Terrakion. So spreading out those speed tiers a little bit, just to give me some, instead of dropping from 124 all the way down to 95 where Kyurem is, it gives me something put in the middle there to help out with speed tiering and, messing up my opponent a little bit with their speed tiers. So it gave me a really good offensive presence, and it gave me another powerful Z user. So Landorus, Therian, and Terrakion ended up being my 2 Z users, so they were really, really good for that. So moving on overall for the draft, going over the checklist, as you can see, we only had 2 Stealth Rockers out of the 4 I wanted. We didn't get Toxic Spikes. We didn't get a Toxic Spikes Absorber. We do not have a Rapid Spinner on this team. We don't have a Spin Blocker, so we don't have a Ghost type. We only have 1 form of priority in the Scizor's Bullet Punch. And we do not have a second ground immunity. The only one we have is the Landorus. Now, I do have the Chestnut, which takes ground moves really, really well. And Slowbro, that can take a lot of ground moves too. But we don't have that second immunity. So, overall, I was really, really happy with this team. I was very happy with this team, and so far I feel like I've used it really, really well. I feel like it fits my playstyle exceptionally. Definitely wish I got more hazards. I have 2 Stealth Rockers and a Spiker, and just for me, especially using Volt Turn, I really don't think that's enough. I do also wish that I got a Rapid Spinner, maybe 2, and potentially another Defogger. So hazards have really become a little bit of an issue this season for me. I do wish I had gotten a Rapid Spinner or a Defogger, another Defogger, or both, just to help keep hazards off my side of the field, because with all the Volt Turn this team has, I mean, we have 1, 2, Rabombi gets U-turn, 3, 4, 5, 6. With 6 Volt Turners, half my team gets momentum. It would be nice to keep hazards off the field if I'm going to be switching so much. So that's definitely something I would have wished for. Priority, I made it a point to get at least a mon with priority. I wish I got more. In past seasons, I haven't had any priority, and that really ended up biting me in the butt later in the season. So I'm glad I got something with Scizor, but more priority is definitely needed for a solid team. The second ground immunity isn't a huge issue, but it's still nice to have at some points. So, and then a Toxic Spikes and Toxic Spikes Absorber, just a poison type. You know, this team doesn't really have a poison type that would help with a little bit of a fairy weakness. I mean, I have 1 mon that resists fairy, so, and that's Scizor, which doesn't really want to take a Moonblast or a Hyper Voice that well. So a poison type would definitely help this team. It could give it some Toxic Spikes. It could give it that Toxic Spikes Absorber. Overall, like I said, I was really happy with this team. I came out of the draft really excited for the season and really ready to use this draft. I haven't made any transactions over the season. I don't like to make a whole lot of transactions. I like to take what I drafted and kind of roll with it. But, you know, and I didn't really see any moves that I really wanted to make. This team kind of forced me to run Stealth Rocks on Landers every week, which did suck a little bit. There were a couple weeks where I ran it Scarfed with Rocks. I think I ran Stealth Rocks on a Terrakion maybe once or twice, not a lot. So definitely another rocker or 2 could have helped a lot, especially a defensive rocker if I wanted to run Landers offensive. I brought Spikes on Chestnut a couple times, and it was okay. But I definitely think a better Spikes user might help. But overall, I hit most of the things on my checklist. I was really happy with this team, and that's pretty much how I drafted. So there were a couple mons that did get sniped from me. There were a couple mons that I wanted to use, and I just either didn't have the points for, or my team just didn't shape up for me to be able to use it that way. But I'm still very happy with this team and how it turned out, and that I was able to get a lot of the things on my checklist. So I'm going to stop rambling. That is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think of these kinds of videos, explaining, you know, why I do what I do, things like that, and, you know, how I draft or how I build teams, things like that. Let me know what you think. Please give me some feedback. I'd love to hear it. Make sure you leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.